Hi everyone, this is BritSimon. So I wanted to record a video specifically about the current lawsuit appeals on the DV2020 and DV2021 cases. I wanted to explain my perspective, and this may differ to what the lawyers are saying, actually, but my perspective of what I think will happen next. In the appeals, etc. Now, as I just mentioned, the lawyers may see this differently, and you have to understand. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a practical-minded person, I suppose you could say, and I'm looking at this from what I think is a realistic point of view. You are free to disagree with me. You are free to listen to the lawyers. With whatever they think and say. They are the experts for sure, but I think some of you will not understand the lawyer speak, and I'm concerned that you get a realistic understanding of what's going on. So that's what I wanted to address. So what's happened? Well, I made a video. I went live a few days ago. I think it was Wednesday, and at the time I predicted that we would see an appeal in the Gomez case. The Gomez case obviously is the pro bono case filed by Ayla and team. There was also the Aker case, which was also a pro bono by Charles Cook and team. And so the Gomez cases, were all sort of grouped together. Mohammed, Fongjog, Kennedy is a part of that now, I believe. All of those cases are brought together for DV2020 under the Gomez case. And the Gomez case covered everybody who had not already received their visa for DV2020. And there was an allocation made of 9,095 visas. And the deadline for issuance for that is by the end of fiscal year 2022, which means 30th of September 2022. The government had until this Monday to appeal. And so a couple of days ago, I predicted that they would appeal either on Thursday or Friday. And lo and behold, that's what they did. Friday afternoon, they issued the appeal. So that appeal, I believed, was predictable and necessary from the government's point of view, because they had already appealed the 2021 cases, which were, really the same sort of legal arguments, slight difference in some of the legal arguments, but fundamentally the same legal arguments were used. Excuse me. The same legal arguments were used in the 2021 case as in the 2020 case, and the same impact was there that the government don't like. Excuse me, I've got a cough, so I have to suck on a cough sweet. The government don't like what they're being told in any of these lawsuits, the DV2020 or DV2021. The bits they don't like are, they don't like that they have to keep on issuing visas after the end of the fiscal year. That's a very important principle for them, and they don't want to be put into that position. Funnily enough, several years ago there was another case called the Al-Makrami case, I think, and that was appealed, and it took quite a long time. But the government was forced to consider or to issue a visa after the end of the fiscal year on a DV lottery case. So we've got precedent, and there were other clever precedents brought forward by the legal teams in DV2020 and then DV2021. So this particular argument that the government are concerned with, they're fighting hard on that topic, but frankly, I'm not quite sure why they're fighting that. The other thing that they are fighting as a principle is the difference between the president having the authority to cease issuance of visas versus the president having the authority to stop people entering the country. Essentially, the law under 212F it gives the president quite strong powers to say, for certain unusual reasons, they can shut down entry of people into the USA. That's a presidential power that we have not really taken out in these lawsuits at all. However, the government took that presidential power, which was used by Trump and then continued to be used by Biden, took that power and said, because you can't enter the USA, we're going to sort of make the case or draw the conclusion that we don't even have to issue you a visa. We don't have to even process your case. And so the lawsuits attacked that principle and said, look, even if you say that the president can stop entry into the country, we still want the visas issued. We still want the cases processed. And Judge Mehta agreed with those arguments and said, no, government, you can't stop processing. You can't stop visa issuance because of 212F. Now, I think that's a big deal to the government, and I think that's essentially what they're fighting. But in terms of what are they appealing, we don't actually know what they're appealing yet. We don't know, the exact terms of the appeals. The reason for that is they've issued a notice of the appeal, but they haven't yet had to put out their legal arguments to say exactly what they're appealing against. So we don't have the full terms. We can only guess at this moment. But if I had to guess, and if I were to guess, it would be on those issues, 212F, and whether you can issue visas after the end of the fiscal year. I think that's what the appeal is going to be. I've been asked a number of times whether they're appealing the numbers. They're not appealing the numbers. That's not really the point. Whether it's 9,095 or 10,025 or whatever other number, it's not the numbers they're appealing. They don't want to issue one visa after the end of the fiscal year. They don't want to do it, right? So that's the appeal is not about the numbers. It's about the principle of the argument. Okay, so that's what they're appealing. How long will these appeals take? They're going to take a long time. I think the lawyers have been clear about this, that appeals of this type generally can take around about a year to a year and a half, could be longer. The Al-Makrami case went on a very long time. So, we need to understand this is going to take a long time to resolve. Now, what I think is important to understand is, will they process and issue visas while the appeal is being processed? This is an important question. Now, I think this is where I'm going to differ on the lawyers a little bit. The lawyers will say that the process of issuing visas can go ahead while the appeal is in process, and that's perfectly true. They'll also go on to say that the government would need to ask for a stay against the order in order to stop the processing of visas, right? Now, does that mean that they're going to continue and issue visas? No, it doesn't. Just because they haven't yet entered the stay or asked for the stay, and just because they have been told to process visas as quickly as possible, it does not mean that the original order gave them a date by which they must start. There are some reporting dates in there, but there's nothing to say that they have to. I mean, they could, in theory, they could completely ignore all of these visas until, let's say, the last week of September, 2022, and they could issue all of the reserved visas in a week. They could do that. There's nothing in, when I say they could do that, there's nothing in the order that stops them delaying all of that work until a later point. As long as they do it by 30th of September, that's all they have to do, right? So they can easily respond to the judge and say, don't worry, judge, we're working on it. We're working on it. That's one thing they could do. But in reality, I think it's absolutely obvious and certain that they're going to apply for a stay. Now, what is a stay, right? let's talk about that. What does it mean? A stay is a temporary postponement, usually temporary, a temporary postponement against an order. Now, it's hard to get a stay. I actually looked it up earlier. There are some standards, some legal standards you need to meet. I wonder if I can find that so I can read that to you. Yeah, I have that here. Okay, so in order to get the stay, and this is quite a high legal standard, the party seeking a stay, the government, would need to show 4 things. That he will likely prevail on the merits of the appeal, that he will suffer irreparable harm or injury if the stay is denied, that the other parties will not be substantially harmed by the stay, and that the public interest is served by granting the stay. Okay, let me work backwards to see whether the stay is likely to happen, right? Is there a public interest? Well, the government are going to make that case. That's always an ambiguous thing. They're going to make the case that, yes, there's a public interest. And the public they care about, by the way, the public that they will argue for is the United States public, not the public in other countries. So as far as they're concerned, they represent the public, right? Will the government suffer irreparable harm if the stay is denied? And will the parties, the other parties, you, the DV lottery winners, will you not be substantially harmed by the stay? So they're trying to show, look, we're going to be hurt. We, the government, are going to be hurt if you don't give us this stay. If you force us to issue these visas, we'll be hurt. On the other hand, the people that are waiting, they're going to say, the people that are waiting, they're waiting. It doesn't matter. They're protected. It doesn't matter whether they wait a month or 12 months, Judge. That's what they're going to say. It makes no difference. Now, in reality, it does make a difference. It makes a difference to some of you individually. Out of the people that we know will get the visas, somebody is going to die, right, before they get the visa. Now, with DV lottery cases, if the principal applicant dies, the derivatives don't get any benefit from the win of the principal applicant, right? So you could easily have a position where a principal lottery winner dies and several family members lose their ability to emigrate to the USA because they were waiting for this lawsuit. Now, can you prove that which of these people are going to die? Of course you can't, right? So since there is, there is going to be a sort of a partial representation of visas amongst a larger group, you can't sort of draw the line and say for sure one of these people are going to die or some of these people are going to die and therefore their families will lose their chance to emigrate. You can't make that case. I don't believe you can make that case if you're, on the legal team. The legal team, I'm sure, will try and make that case. Or some other harm will happen. They can also refer to, for example, people in Afghanistan who are under threat of harm because of the political situation there with the Taliban, etc. They're going to look at other countries such as Yemen or Ethiopia that are going through difficult times politically. But again, can you literally find one example to say that out of all of the groups of people, out of all the people, someone that is guaranteed to get a visa is going to be harmed? It's very difficult to make that case because you don't know who's guaranteed to get the visa and you can't say that they will be harmed, right? Can the government claim that they will suffer irreparable harm if the stay is denied? Yeah, they can, actually. That one's easier because there is a deadline, right? The deadline is, let's say, 10 months from now. So in 10 months from now, they've got to issue these visas. If the appeal is actually ongoing past that time, and they have to meet the deadline, the government have to meet the deadline, then absolutely their argument will be, look, if we're forced to issue the visas while our appeal is going, that's not right, Judge. We need time to have the full justice system available to us. We want the full time available to have these arguments heard in court, and that's going to take a year or is it going to take 18 months? So that weighs very, very strongly in the government's favor, that they can show that irreparable injury can be caused. Because once the visas are issued, and once the people who got those visas issued enter the USA, nobody's going to turn those people around and say, I'm sorry, we're taking your green card away. That's not going to happen, right? So as far as their case is concerned, the government will be able to show that they are likely to suffer irreparable injury. Okay. The first point I mentioned was, can they that they will likely prevail on the merits of the appeal? That one's tough. I don't think the government have got any new arguments to make. They're going to make the same arguments, right? And they've made those arguments in front of Judge Mehta, and they've lost each and every time on several arguments, right? They've lost every time. They've done a lousy job of well, it's not that they've done a lousy job. They had a lousy position, frankly. You know, they did probably the best they could do with a crappy hand. If you're playing poker and you've got a 3 and a 5, you haven't got a very good hand, right? So the reality is they didn't have a very good case. They therefore made a pretty bad case. Now, how is that suddenly going to get better in front of the appeals court? I don't think it's going to get better. However, I think point 2, that they're going to suffer irreparable injury, I think that's going to weigh very heavily in their favor. So a stay is a temporary postponement of the order. I think it's almost it's almost completely unthinkable that the government wouldn't ask for a stay. And I think it's at least 50-50 that they actually win the stay. I think they're likely to win a stay. Probably on balance, it's probably 51-49. But we don't know for sure. I mean, the lawyers can argue with me about that, though they won't bother arguing with me. But they can disagree with me, and you can disagree with me, right? But for many of you being told at the moment, look, visa processing can continue while the appeal is ongoing, I don't think that's the right answer. I think the right answer is the government will delay issuance of visas and they'll ask for a stay fairly soon, right? And when they ask for a stay, I think they're likely to get it. Okay, and so the order will then have to be amended to change the date to give more time to allow the appeal to go forward. Or the appeals judges say, look, this case is so heavily weighed in favor of the plaintiffs, the DV winners, so heavily weighed in their favor that you're not going to get the stay. We don't think you're going to win on the merits of that argument. And because we then are not going to give you the stay, it effectively destroys the appeal for the government, right? Because the government will have to go ahead and issue the visas anyway by the deadlines, right? So I think the case, personally, I think the case will hinge on the stay, meaning we may not have to wait a full 18 months for the appeals to go through. What we'll probably have to wait for is the amount of time it takes for the stay to be argued. If the government lose the stay, then frankly, we win because visas will be issued, right? On the other hand, I don't think the government will be issuing visas until that stay is heard. And it's possible and possibly even likely that the stay is granted because, as I say, it either goes one way or the other. The government's appeal is almost useless unless they also get the stay. So the stay is actually, that's going to be the important argument. Do they get the stay or not? That actually works pretty well in our favor because getting a stay, for the reasons I just mentioned, is a pretty high standard for them to hit. And I'm sure the lawyers are probably feeling a bit more confident than I am that they can argue to avoid the stay being granted. But if the government do get the stay, then it will mean a longer period of time, and it means we won't see visas issued, before the 30th of September deadline. Okay, right. Let me go back. Where am I? Yeah, where am I? Dear me, I'm all over the place here. Okay. Right, that's what a stay is and how it will impact us. Another interesting question I was asked the other day is, because we've got the no documents policy now for DV2022, which is theoretically a pilot program, will that apply to DV2020 and DV2021? At this point, it doesn't apply to DV2020 and 2021. And the government don't have to make it apply, right? Nothing in the statement released the other day forces them. It's their decision. That's not a court-ordered thing. So nothing is actually forcing them to apply their own rule to DV 2020 and DV 2021, right? They can choose whether they apply that new rule of not having to be documentarily qualified and not having to submit documents. They can choose whether to apply that or not. On balance, I think it's unlikely, if they are going to go ahead and process visas, I think it's unlikely they will apply the no documents policy, in which case the documentarily qualified cases have a better chance than non-documentarily qualified cases in those cases, right? So that was a question I wanted to cover there. And then let me just, I thought I had this one, the BBB. Okay, so this is the last point I wanted to talk about. So we've talked about the appeals process and what will happen in that, but what about the BBB? So we've got the Build Back Better bill going through Congress at the moment. I think the timeline for that is that about Christmas Eve or thereabouts is the deadline for them to vote for that bill. I don't know which way that's going to go. I can't predict it, right? It's looking good. So far, the language that is helpful to DV lottery cases for both DV 2020 and DV 2021, and also for Muslim ban folks from 2017 onwards. The language that affects those cases is still in the bill, but the government are not in a strong position to pass any bill they want in the Senate. The reality is, you have to understand how a democracy in America works. Many people, I see these comments all the time. The anti-immigrant Biden is, why is he on the one hand saying he wants to increase DV visas, and on the other hand he's appealing these cases, or on the other hand, he's got the BBB bill, or he's fighting against, issuing visas. I understand why certain people, lawyers, etc., say those sort of things, but I honestly don't understand why others make those comments. It's as if people think that Biden is a king. He's not a king. Trump was not a king. I've made that point before in saying that Trump wasn't able to do some bad things, because he's not a king. And in the same way, Biden's not a king, right? When a president comes to power, he still needs to go through Congress to get any laws enacted. And unfortunately, when Biden was elected, although he's the president of the country, he didn't have a very strong majority in particularly the Senate. He only has 50 of the 50 senators, of the 100 senators on his side, right? And they don't all agree with him. And so he can't push through any legislation he wants. He's got to negotiate. And it takes time. And the government outside of Biden, the people the senators, the representatives, etc., they have their own agendas of things they want to get done as well. It's not all driven by Biden. So from a legal lawmaking point of view, Biden isn't the only person that makes the decision. And even if it were to be like that, Biden isn't sitting in the same room as the lawyers that are going into court and battling us on these legal points. It's not one big room, folks. Come on. We've got to understand the government is a big organization. It's a lot of different people with differing mindsets, different points of view, some of them anti-immigrant, some of them not. Some of the lawyers are just arguing because they've got a legal point to make. They're not particularly anti-immigrant necessarily. They're simply trying to make a point and argue the point that they see as a point of principle that they need to defend. And it's not like I don't think Biden wakes up in the morning and says, "Oh, how can I screw over DV lottery candidates this morning? What can I do to make their lives harder?" It's not like that at all. I think that's a naive, pathetic, frankly, perspective. If you really believe it's like that, it's not like that at all. Now, I'm not saying I love Biden. I didn't have, I don't drive around town. There are people who drive around my town with Trump flags. Still, I mean, Trump is not our president, hasn't been for some time, right? But they're still driving around with it on the back of their truck. They've got a flag saying Trump 2020 or Trump 2024 or just Trump's wonderful or whatever. There are people who worshipped Trump, right? I hated the man. I thought he was a pathetic individual in every way possible. I hated the man. I was delighted to see him replaced, and I'd have seen him. I'd have happily voted if I could have done. I'd have voted for a sick monkey to be our president prior to voting for Trump again. Literally any other choice in the whole country out of 320 million people, well, apart from Stephen Miller, perhaps, but almost any other person would be a more decent, smarter, more useful, worthwhile human being than Trump, right? Now, it doesn't make me deranged about Trump. I know some of you think I'm deranged about Trump. But so, yes, I was anti-Trump, but I wasn't so pro-Biden that I wear Biden underwear or go to bed sleeping, on a pillowcase with Joe Biden's picture on it. I judge the man for what he does, but I also recognize that he's not entirely in charge of the processes that we sometimes attribute to him. So, blaming him for every ill in our daily lives in DV lottery world is kind of silly, frankly. I think in the big, broad strokes, he should have done more for immigration in general. And he campaigned on a platform of doing more for immigrants in general. But he didn't campaign on a platform of making DV lottery better. He didn't, right? Nobody voted for Biden because of that. So anyway, so some of you are a bit nuts about your sort of, Biden comments, but, whatever, feel free. Basically, will the BBB bill pass and will we get that help? I don't know. I hope we hear by Christmas, December 25th. I hope, right? If we don't get the success in that particular bill, if they take out the language, then it'll be a longer fight. But the fight will continue, right? And the lawsuits will continue. The appeals will continue. So this is going to be a longer process. And this was really the point of the video here. I wanted to make clear that the process is going to take time for DV2020 and DV2021 folks. It's going to take more time to argue through, and we have to see what's going to happen next, with those lawsuits. But I think the expectation that you should have is that they're not going to start issuing DV2020 visas or DV2021 visas while these appeals go on. I think you should expect them to apply for a stay, and I think there's a 50-50 or perhaps 51-49 chance that they get that stay. In which case it'll make the whole thing last a lot longer. Okay. Okay, so I hope that's clarified what's going on in the lawsuits. I hope it's clarified about the BBB and who's running the country and all of those sorts of things. I hope you understand better the chances of getting visas issued, and I'd be interested in any of your questions, but please feel free to let me know if you've got questions about this. But I do want to make sure that you're not sitting there by the phone, expecting for DV 2020 cases to be starting issuing, next week. I don't think that's going to happen. I'll be thrilled if it does, but I don't think that's going to happen, right? So I think it's going to take some time, and we just have to be patient and wait for that. Okay. All right, everybody. I'll be addressing. I'll be making another video this weekend. Possibly do that one as a live to take questions. But I just wanted to particularly make a video without questions and anticipating some of your questions on this particular topic. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye now. Keep well.